When you talk about allowing people to deal drugs in communities, I mean, you think that is an above board business? It is not an above board business.
Yeah.
The people who are involved are not above board. Even at the biggest of those, publicly traded Canadian and U.S. Marijuana companies, you would be stunned at the kinds of people that are running these companies. They're total crooks in every sense of the term.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome to the Narrative Podcast. Mike Andrews, Aaron Bear, David Mahan joining you for the last narrative before Christmas. And fellas, could you have asked for a better Christmas present than the Cincinnati Enquirer?
Honestly, like, I can't. Listen, the Enquirer has never been our best friends. They certainly were not trying to do us any favors with this. And certainly there's things in that story where they're I don't want to say they're trying to embarrass us, but I'm sure they knew they're thinking we're not going to be happy about that being out there.
Ha, gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center calls them a hate group, and I'm like, yeah,
True.
I'm actually glad that I'm not glad they call us a hate group, but if the SPLC were to like us, we'd be doing something wrong, right? So I'm like, hey, all right, it is what it is.
Yeah, but we wanted to talk about the article today, not so much as a response that we needed to refute anything that they said or that type of thing, but there are some interesting points that they raised throughout the article just from a standpoint of we can have a conversation around these issues beyond what they said about us in the article. And it starts with the fact that the headline of the article is a quote from Senator Christina Rogner, or part of it, that says they're relentless. CCV is relentless in what they do. And then how a Christian group turns beliefs into bills. And I think the implication of that headline choice is that biblical morality and Christianity doesn't belong in the public square in some way, or should not apply to politics. But yet there's this importance of, as we've said numerous times here at CCV, put your faith into action, do something with your faith, take it into the public square. So I think that the negative side of that headline is you should be quiet. You shouldn't talk about this. So why is it that Christian beliefs are the ones that are so often singled out for this type of thing? Like, don't push those beliefs on me. But yet, anytime somebody brings something into the public square, they're bringing their beliefs.
Right. No, Mike, that's the biggest point about this is, the question is, whose beliefs are we going to be enacting into law, right? And that's the way a republic works, is that you have a very broad society, broad group of people. You have to figure out how are you all going to live together because you don't agree on everything. And again, all of us are married. Us and our spouses don't agree on everything. I just always pray for Elise because David's wrong so often. And yet
I always agree with Lindsay. I'd like to say that.
I can only imagine, yeah.
Liars, guys. Liars.
No, but you have to have a process by which you determine which way you go, right? And that's what, in our Republican form of government, this is what we do, is we have this process to decide what's the right way, what's the wrong way, what should be legal, what should be illegal. And all we're doing is saying, hey, here's what we think is the right way of going. Do you guys agree with us? If you don't agree with us, here's the rationale for it, and come along with us. The reality is that this whole framing of separation of church and state, or us pushing our beliefs, is a attempt to silence us from being a part of the process, right?
And though they would never say it, my beef with the media is, and I said over and over again, is that somehow this secular worldview of whatever issue is neutral. Right. And the Christian worldview, is not. And so it's like, it doesn't matter what else we're talking about. It could be Islam, it could be whatever, but that's all neutral, And when I'm talking to kids in schools, back when I was in that world, that was what I was hearing from them, is that somehow, all these other views were cool and then the Christian view wasn't. But in this report, I feel like they kind of stumbled on a compliment, right? They stumbled on a compliment over and over again. We are relentless. But it was like all these little digs inside of it. I know, Aaron, you love this stuff, but I'm like, this group, journalism, is supposed to be neutral, right? Here's what happened. Here's what you weren't there to see yourselves. So we're going to fill in all the little, the little blanks in the middle, and you make your own determination of what's going on. But that's not what they are anymore.
Well, yeah, the assumption, David, to your point, the assumption in the article is the things we advocate for at CCV are so unpopular that the only way we can get it done is by relentless pressure and all of these kind of things. And yes, we are relentless, right? David is a relentless advocate at the State House. I really mean that. And so is Troy and Ryan. Like, we have a team that is just and there all the time. And it's a part of the reason we purchased this building across from Capitol Square, was so that we could be there all the time.
If we don't want to work, we don't eat. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, seriously, right? But what they're wrong about is that these views are so unpopular, right? Again, think about things like Save Women's Sports. That's
it's a 70, 80 issue.
Yeah. It's a massively popular issue. The problem is actually where you really see the minority view getting driven is by these corporately backed issues, right? Things like, like our interview today with Luke on marijuana, right? That's an issue that is fully pushed by an industry that's pushing out lies and repeating them again and again and again and putting them into the bloodstream because it's a huge moneymaker for them. We're actually the ones there that there is no money in opposing, like I said to Luke, there's no money in opposing weed. There's no money in opposing abortion, right? Like there's all the money in the world in performing abortions, but you don't make money when you stop an abortion. But the reality is what we're actually bringing to the table is truth and common sense and the people to the process.
And we have the audacity to push where folks don't want to push. And that's where the anything about being unpopular would be. SAFE Act, there was nobody wanted to get on that bill. By the end, we were doing veto overrides.
By the end, Mitch McConnell was spending $240 million in elections because they realized, people really don't like doing trans procedures on kids.
So it's okay to say boys can't be girls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, voters are going to come with us when we say that.
One thing I noted in that idea too, especially as they talk to people on the other side of the aisle from us, is, and I hadn't thought about it much since probably 2016 when it was a bigger deal, is Hillary was making her run for president, and there was a lot of differentiation between freedom of worship and freedom of religion. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed like that idea was so strong on the other side that, it's fine if they believe whatever they want and they keep it in their churches and they keep it in their homes, but how dare they try and do this at the State House? And that's just not a Christian belief.
No,
we just can't segment like that.
It's not an American belief, right? Like all throughout history, even your most oppressive governments, right? The Soviet Union, these radical jihadist countries. You can believe whatever you want. They're like, sure, think what you want, but you're going to do what we say, right? That's what religious freedom actually means, is how am I structuring and ordering my life? Am I able to structure and order my life in line with my faith, right? I mean, even the pilgrims that came over here, like those are original folks that came over. They were sure, you could think whatever you want, but you're going to be an Anglican. Right, like you're going to be following the Church of England in the way that we determine. No, the idea is I want to practice my faith, which means how I live my life. I want to practice that in lines of my faith, and allow my faith to form my whole person. That's what religious freedom is all about. And this whole idea of just think whatever you want. Hey, if that's what religious freedom means, America is no different than China.
There was a piece in here too where they traced CCV's beginnings from the basement of a church in Cincinnati to where we are today, right across the street from the State House. And sort of that idea of, there's got to be something shady going on here. And we would just point that to the goodness of God and to the number of faithful men and women who for 40 some years have put their hand to the plow here and done this work that they've been called to.
And like many of the donors is listening right now. I mean, it's just faithful giving.
Yeah. No, that's to me, like, it's funny. And they even point to I think one of the things in the framing of it that we're backed by the Heritage Foundation because we won an innovation prize for them. They talked about how, I think it was 2023, we had a $4 million, or 2024, we had a $4 million budget. By the grace of God, we've grown even since then. But they try to make it sound like we're being propped up by Heritage. Well, even if we were a $4 million organization when we got that $100,000 grant, that's not like 5% of our budget, right? That was a prize we won for our school planting work. They wanted to recognize, but that's the reality is our support comes from Ohio families because we we tell them, hey, here's a problem. We're going to go fix it. Here's kids aren't learning to read. We're going to start schools so kids can get out. Kids are being sterilized. We're going to stop that from happening in these hospitals, right? Businesses are being attacked. We're going to start the Christian Business Partnership. They always do this thing where they request your 990s to look at our tax filings, which, again, are all public online. You can go to GuideStar or ProPublic or wherever and pull up our 990s and see what our annual income is. And again, to me, what I was most grateful for, even with this article, was we are who we say we are, right? There's no hidden agenda. We get on this podcast every week and we say, hey, we believe this and this needs to happen and we're going to be working on this, and then we go do it. Go figure.
Yeah. Kind of like that New Yorker piece about how we're funneling all this money away from public schools. Like, we literally tell everybody that we're starting schools.
Exactly. Yeah. What are you talking about?
And don't take our word for it. Like, one of the people that responded to some of this interview was Representative Josh Williams.
Yep.
And basically, this is what he had to say. What this article shows is it's not donations that make lobbyists key. It's aligning on policy, sitting down, highlighting the issues, and working toward a direct solution through legislation. That is the secret sauce of CCV. You are proactive and not just defensive, because you are driven by a calling that is devoid of individual egos or power trips. You simply want good policy, right? So when our opposition says that we're relentless, you could probably believe we're relentless. When the folks that we work with every day on this policy for the people of Ohio say that it's not about money, it's about our devotion to our calling to the Lord, you can pretty much believe that that's what it's about here at CCV.
Yeah. And you mentioned a number of the policy issues that we've taken on, Aaron: abortion, LGBTQ issues, SAFE Act, transgender medicine on kids being a horrible idea, and those types of things. And it's like, it's so anathema to their worldview that anybody could be against that. Like, that they just have to be horrible people. But we're actually standing on deeply held principle and conviction that we believe the Word of God is true, and the Word of God calls us to action when we see something that doesn't align with those timeless truths.
Right. And what I would challenge everybody is go pull any testimony David has given, or Troy McIntosh, or Ryan, or any of our advocates through the years, and you will never find a time where David gets up and says, vote for this bill, for the Bible says you. Thus saith the Lord. Right. And if you don't do this, let hellfire rain down upon you and all. No.
He saves that for the office.
He saves that here. But
sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Now, we will appeal to, just like the founders did, we will appeal to our Creator. But we come in reason. And we say, hey, here's the facts and the data. If we all can agree that kids growing up healthy, or kids learning to read, is a good thing, right? Which, by the way, that idea is deeply Christian, and nobody wants to even acknowledge, hey, that's actually a religious belief right there. But we'll move on from that, right? But if we all agree that learning to read is a good thing, therefore, here's the policy, and here's the data that says the best thing for that is getting these cell phones out of the schools, or the best thing for that is creating competition in the education space, and that's what school choice is about. We come and we compete with ideas, but we're honest about who we are and what we claim, because the bottom line is, the minute we separate the reason we care about what we care about from the actual policy, we fall apart. And that's what's happening in America today, is we are separating the values our nation was founded on from the originator of those values, which is the God and Creator himself.
Yeah, and we don't need to necessarily always appeal to the Bible in the public testimony and that kind of thing, but it can undergird everything we do, because if God has ordered creation in a certain way, then we're all going to be more prosperous if we have laws that reflect that.
Amen.
Another piece that they called out is our network of lawmakers and churches, and then typical tactic here, saying we push our agenda. And I thought Troy in our group chat made a great point the other day. Why is it only the right that pushes things? Right. Yeah. So, but again, that gets down to the importance of action in the public square, and finding those who align with us and are willing to work with us on these issues. And willing to work with David is a huge part of that.
I'm holding back tears here. I mean, we were you're in a hearing room at the State House, and you have an entire hearing room full of lobbyists. on one issue, right? So an industry comes in and buys up 20, 25, 30 lobbyists to push their agenda
Push
in
iGaming.
this room.
Push
Right.
casinos on iPhones, which who in Ohio was like, you know what I wish I could do is play a slot machine on my phone. Right?
When we're standing there, we're talking about the pastors in Greene County, in Xenia. We're talking about, families in Salina whose kids are being exposed to obscenity. Yep. All the members know that. And that's why when we walk in the room, the members will text me. I'll be sitting in the back of the room, and they'll text me and say, man, here comes the cavalry. Right? The cavalry for who? Not some industry, but the people that we represent, the 5,000 churches and the deacons and the church mothers who worried about their grandkids and things like that. That's who we represent, and they know it. And every time there's an article like this that comes out, it's not just talking about CCV, but who does CCV represent?
Right.
It's you. Those of you who are listening to this podcast right now, they know you stand with us and we stand with you. And so you right here in the battle with us.
Well, and that's where these lawmakers actually come from. That's the big thing about this. The vast majority of these lawmakers are coming from Wyandotte County or Benton County or Tuscarawas County, right? Like they are churchgoers. They're normal folks that run businesses and things like that, and raise kids, and then they come to the state house and they get in this pressure cooker, right? They get in this world where lobbyists are showing up and telling them this is what you have to do, and unless someone is there to support them and say, no, that actually, what's right. You know this. Putting casinos on phones is wrong. All they have is what the lobbyists are telling them to do. I mean, I still remember that first day of the select committee on gaming, and I walk into that room, and it's all lobbyists and CCV, all gaming lobbyists, and even some lobbyists that I know are Christians that have been bought off by the gaming industry, and they're looking sheepishly at us, right? Like that's the effect of having Christians down at the state house, because they know what they're doing is wrong.
And this is where I get in trouble around here, because I don't even like to be around some of these guys, and I don't want members seeing me around some of these guys, because they're guns for hire. And even though I'm a lobbyist, I'm not that kind of lobbyist, right? And so I try to have those meetings in private. But
how's that working out for you?
That's on a snapshot. But but we're different. The members know we're different, and that's what I love about my job.
Yeah. Well, and the last piece here that I want us to cover is the obligatory scare quotes around no limit between church and state.
No limit. Exactly.
No limit. Now,
cage match.
This is a just common argument. It won't die that the freedom of religion means you can't bring your religion to the public square.
Freedom from religion.
Yeah. Aaron, I'm going to ask you to be our civics teacher. Be our civics teacher again and break this down for us.
That was the I remember I did a NPR thing a while ago, and they talked about how do I believe in do I think the Constitution's right where it says separation of church and state? And I'd be like, okay, so number one, where are those words in the Constitution? That phrase is not in there. So let's back up there and talk about reality. Number two, even if we were to take that phrase at face value, I absolutely believe in that. I do not want the state involved in the church's business, right? That's what we're here in many ways to do, is to say, hey, state, you don't have the ability to instruct the actions of Christians. Stay out of our lane, right? But all the state is a function of what the people want. That's what, Joe Backholm, probably about 5 years ago, did a video for the Colson Center. They have these "What Would You Say" videos, and it's one of my favorite that they did on what is politics, right? And I loved his definition of politics being it's the process by which we decide the rules of our land, right? That's all the state house is. That all the government is the government in America is a function of a bunch of different people that disagree, trying to decide which way they go. And so we're coming here saying, here's what's right, and the direction that our state should go. and these are the things that should be allowed. These are the things that aren't. And so the idea that we're trying to blur the lines or set up a super like Christian government is insane. You know who does want to do that though, right? They talk about Christian nationalism. You know who does want to do that? Islam, right? That is by definition what the caliphate wants to do and what Islamism is all about, right? This is yet that conversation can't be had in America right now. That we need to be having more and more. So again, this is when they can't beat you, they just have to distort you, and that's what they attempted to do here. But
and maybe it'd be good to have Chris in here on this question, but I mean I've been here coming up on 6 years. And I can clearly say that's where all these gray hairs are coming from, family. Those of y'all that saying, man, he looks old and tired and beat down. That's because I am, and this place is killing me. But I will say that it's different when I'm talking in the community to churches. It used to be that disdain that folks looked at me when I said that I was, a lobbyist and worked down at the State House. Now it's like a hero thing. Like it's weird how fast that has changed. To where folks kind of get it. They get what is government. They get what is politics and the role of the church in that. And even those that don't really get it, when you're trying to teach them, like I do when I'm in churches, it's easily, let's move on. I don't know. I'd like to say that that's all us and our work and our labor with the body, but there's a cultural shift that's happening. I think it's because we've been pushed in a corner so long that we're getting sick of it, and we know, look, something's got to change, and just like everything else, if the church isn't going to change it, nobody will.
Yeah, I mean, my view of it is I think COVID, the gender stuff, the transgender stuff
for sure.
Had a big part of that. I think a lot of even some of the CRT stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That I know so many churches and Christians during the whole summer of love of BLM and all that kind of stuff, that they heard brothers and sisters saying there is systematic racism everywhere and we've got to deal with it, and the language of BLM was all deeply Christian language, right? It was all appealing to the Christian heart. So there were so many churches that I saw go along with it that now feel used and abused by it because it was actually pushing a broader progressive communist agenda, destruction of the nuclear family, all of these kind of things. And it was a completely downward cycle of it's not just that systematic racism is a thing, but you are racist and you will always be racist and there's nothing you can do about it. And like a real graceless worldview. And I think you saw a lot of churches and pastors be open to that conversation when it first started and then see, oh no, this is not an argument in good faith. And actually the arguments they're making are completely bogus. So I think that played a part in it. And I think the other part of it too, though, Dave, where all of these issues have sort of brought people to hey, we know Christians need to be involved. I actually think, and I'm just going to speak for myself, but maybe this has been your experience too. I've just become even more bold in just being unapologetic about the importance of Christians being involved in politics. I know I used to, when I would do talks, I would kind of approach it of like, I need to try to convince you of the need to be here. I just, especially since COVID, my view is just the assumption is we are here. And the assumption is you are doing something wrong if you're not in this space. Because for so many Christians, if the stakes have become so high, and if we're not in this process, it's going to be a disaster.
And anecdotally, we've seen that too. I know that was my experience first hearing about CCV. This is amazing. I can't believe we have this organization representing us. And I think the more people that do find out about us, we see that response. And so thank you, Cincinnati Enquirer, for helping tell that story.
It's a bummer because it actually was an awesome spread. Like I went and got the e-version of like the paper. Because I don't know who actually gets the paper anymore, but like it was.
Is it still the paper? If
right,
it's
I don't know exactly. Or the PDF,
e-paper.
Right, but it was the front page cover of the Sunday edition. I remember in my lifetime, right, when if you were the cover of the Sunday edition of the Sunday edition, I should say Friday, the Sunday edition, it was like a huge deal. And it honestly wasn't. I didn't start getting all the texts until Monday when all all of the roundups and the stories about it hit, which is just a funny change of times.
And funny that I reached out to the Inquirer and said, hey, how can we get some back issues? They said, we don't have any back issues.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, great. So do you even print the paper anymore?
Exactly. Yeah, right.
Anyway, you teed up our interview mentioning that we're talking to Luke Niforatos today about a possible executive order from President Trump to reclassify marijuana. Folks, this is a necessary conversation. This is something that you need to understand. We can't underestimate or understate the importance of this conversation. Stick around for it. You need to be up to speed on what's going on and why this is a big deal. So we're glad to bring this conversation with Luke Niforatos from Smart Approaches to Marijuana, and that is coming up next on The Narrative. In a culture where many Christians feel pressured to stay silent and where biblical truth is often dismissed as irrelevant, CCV is again inviting and gathering believers from across Ohio and beyond to learn why their voice matters and how faith must shape public life for our third annual Essential Summit coming to Columbus in October. You can be first in line right now for the 2026 Essential Summit featuring Frank Turek and, backed by popular demand, Dr. Rosaria Butterfield. Through December 31st, if you use the code FIRSTINLINE at essentialsummit.org, that's code FIRSTINLINE, you can secure your spot to attend next year at the lowest price we will have available. Don't wait, this event is going to fill up quickly. Go to essentialsummit.org and guarantee your place at the 2026 Essential Summit.
Hey, family. Earlier this week, we recorded this podcast with Luke Niforatos from Smart Approaches to Marijuana. At the time, we were discussing the possibility of President Trump reclassifying marijuana from a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 3 drug. Well, since then, the president has already decided that he would, in fact, reclassify. And in this episode, we'll be breaking down all the ramifications of what this unfortunate decision could mean for the country.
We are back on The Narrative, joined now by Luke Niforatos, who is the Executive Vice President of Smart Approaches to Marijuana and is widely recognized as one of the nation's leading drug policy experts.
The best.
Leveraging more than a decade of working on drug addiction and healthcare issues, Luke drives the strategy behind SAM's federal, state, and educational initiatives, and he's testified in state capitals across America, including here in Ohio. And we're grateful to have you today on The Narrative.
Luke professionally makes David Mahan look
amazing,
super smart down at the steakhouse every day.
I don't have to work too hard to do that. I just feed him a little bit of the kindling, and then he gets it, the whole flame going.
No, Luke, you went the wrong way with that. You're supposed to say how hard it is to make him look good. Well, we are grateful for the opportunity to talk with you, and we wanted to have you on the program today because of so much talk about President Trump's possible executive order here to reclassify marijuana. Can you give us, just to start off, the overview of what the drug classification means and what marijuana is classified as right now?
Yes, yeah, happy to give a little background here. So right now in our country, we prohibit all the illicit substances, the drugs that are out there. It's on a scheduling system. Schedule 1 is the most prohibitive, and Schedule 5 is the least prohibitive. And a lot of people think of it as, oh, if you're in 1, then you're, the worst drug ever. And if you're in 5, then, you're the softest drug ever. But that's actually not the way that the scheduling system works. It's actually based on 2 criteria. One is whether or not there's currently accepted medical use for the drug. Is it used in any kind of medication? And the other criteria is it's a level of potential for abuse and harm. So it's those 2 things together that decide what goes on what level of the schedule. So, for example, fentanyl has medical use. It's used in hospital settings, so it's Schedule 2. That doesn't mean that fentanyl is less harmful than marijuana in Schedule 1, or there's LSD is in Schedule 1. That doesn't mean that LSD is worse than fentanyl. What it means is that LSD and marijuana are not medications, but they do have a high potential for abuse, so they go in 1. Fentanyl has a very high potential for abuse, but it is used as a medication, so it goes in Schedule 2. So that just gives you a little bit of a taste of how the scheduling system works. And so where we stand now is marijuana Schedule 1. It is in the Biden administration, President Biden promised as a part of his 2020 campaign to reschedule marijuana. And so when he got into office, he worked with Rachel Levine to prepare this rule that basically they totally defied all the precedents. They totally bent the rules of the DEA to make marijuana fit into Schedule 3 criteria. And they said, we created this rule. They wrote it up. And then, President Trump took office, and they basically left it for Trump to be able to sign his name to it. It makes no sense why Trump would take this and say, okay, now I'm going to sign my name to everything that they just prepared and all the chicanery that they pulled to get this rule done. But that actually is exactly what President Trump is looking at doing even right now as we speak. It is possible that he'll sign an executive order to say that it should be Schedule 3. But that's kind of where we stand now, and that's the background and what our scheduling system looks like.
Yeah. So Luke, the question is why, right? And when I'm hearing Trump talk about it, he's, a lot of times I'm hearing him talk about the research side, right? Like if, okay, we have some questions about the medical use of it, but we could be getting more medical use out of it, right? And I think they just don't understand the difference between cannabis and cannabinoids, right? That we could be researching. But then you also hear this industry side of banking, right? And all of that. So can you kind of give us an understanding of why this rescheduling discussion is actually happening?
Yeah, so the reason why it's happening is quite simply it's money. Rescheduling what it would do. So if marijuana was moved to Schedule 3, it doesn't legalize marijuana. Everything stays federally illegal, but it gives the marijuana industry access to the giant tax break of being able to write off their business expenses. So that would be a more than $2 billion boon to the marijuana industry, which again is federally illegal. So it would basically be a $2 billion reward to this industry. And it's crazy because the number one thing they're probably going to be writing off is their advertising, which we know state after state after state that has this marijuana industry, they are advertising to kids. They are using child-friendly products. So they will be incentivized to do more of that because they'll be able to write that off of their taxes, which they haven't been able to do. So that is the biggest thing that comes from this. It's basically just a message of normalization and a huge financial incentive for the industry. And so the people who are pushing for rescheduling, the people who are pushing the president to do it, are the marijuana guys. What this comes right down to is, and it's been widely reported, that this was all decided in a 2-hour meeting on December 9th, where we understand everyone on the Trump side of the team, the administration, they were telling President, don't do it. But there were two CEOs in that Oval Office meeting on December 9th. It was Kim Rivers, the CEO of one of the largest pot companies in the world, Trulieve, and she's from Florida. And it was the CEO of Scott's Miracle Grow, which they're the ones that are doing all the hydroponics and all they're cashing in on all of the, based in Ohio. Those two CEOs were the ones at the other side of Trump's ear, and they won the day. I don't know what was promised. I don't know how that ended up happening. But what we understand is that now this executive order has been drafted, and he's planning to release it really at any moment. But it's based on that. And those two guys, they could care less about the research into marijuana. Gal and guy. They could care less about the research. What they care about is the tax break. What they care about is the financial ability which this gives them. And so that's why they're pushing the president to do it. They seem to be having some sway.
And again, just so folks understand what these tax breaks are that we're talking about here, if a drug is Schedule 1 and it's got no medical benefit and it's highly abusive, highly likely to be abused, a business can't claim tax breaks on it, or can't claim it as a business expense on their taxes because it's such a dangerous drug, right? There's no good from it, so they can't. The commerce that they're involved with it in the states can't be used. You can't claim tax breaks on those.
And it's federally illegal.
Businesses can write off their advertising expenses, or they can write off other expenses related to the product that they put out. This isn't, Luke, just to your point here, this isn't legalization, right? This isn't a federal legalization. And David, to your other point, this isn't allowing them access to banking, right? So there's still all of these other things that are out there. But all this really is a basically, like you said, Luke, a $2 billion gift to the marijuana industry, which allows for more weed, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's basically Trump is just saying, Merry Christmas, marijuana industry. You guys get a giant tax break. And then here's a bunch of lumps of coal in all the kids' socks and all the family socks and the common man who gets screwed by this because this industry is going to absolutely ramp up overnight. This is a gift to them. It's a big old Christmas present to them, right under the Christmas tree, right in time for Christmas. But all the rest of us get screwed. It doesn't have kids in mind. It doesn't have health and safety in mind. And the other thing that, there's a dynamic to this tax break that people aren't thinking about. So in Maine and in Oklahoma and in a number of other states where they have legalization, the Chinese CCP-backed cartels are operating state-licensed, state-legal marijuana storefronts where they are laundering in fentanyl dollars, laundering in human trafficking dollars into our system. So the expenses, if you will, of these Chinese-backed cartels are going to be tax deductible because they're using the marijuana industry as their front for all of their money laundering. So this tax break is not just a tax break for the pot companies. It's a tax break for these cartels who are very much intricately involved with this industry. So there's a whole cartel public safety angle here that I don't think anyone's telling the president about that is really detrimental. And this actually serves as really having the chance to blow the doors off of what the cartels are doing in states like Maine, Oklahoma, Colorado, and elsewhere where they're having a lot of problems with them.
But Luke, I got to push back because, we've got all these states that have gone, full recreational adult use, and the cartels were supposed to go away and disappear. So are you saying that it hasn't helped the cartel situation across the country?
Yeah, El Chapo didn't become a dentist. The Sinaloa didn't, get into hotel tourism management. No, none of that happened. So it has gotten way worse. The cartels have gotten much worse. And don't take my word for it. The head of Maine's Medical Marijuana Regulatory Commission said in his own words that because of the way the statute is written, they can't deny the known cartel-backed applicants that come across their desks and say, we're applying for a marijuana license. They have to grant it. They are knowingly granting licenses to cartel-backed entities because of the way the statute's written there in Maine. So this is something that it's not pie in the sky. I'm not making it up. It's being testified about before Congress by the Drug Enforcement Administration. This is a known problem. And the reach of these cartels, it's not just about the gangs and these bad people. We're learning that the CCP is involved, that there is actual political stuff that's happening here as well, targeting our country, trying to make it less safe. And so there's been a lot of warnings recently about that. This is definitely not the time to be doing this. This is definitely not the time to be allowing this industry to expand.
Let's just have some real talk about what you're just describing there, because I think for a lot of folks, this can seem like, I don't know, Hollywood type of stuff here. But the fundamental reality is you hear this from law enforcement. Because now, for example, in a state like Ohio or any state that has legalized recreational marijuana, cops can no longer go into a home because of the smell of marijuana. They can no longer pull you over because they are smelling marijuana from your car. They can't tell the difference between a legal shop and an illegal shop, or even a legal shop that is illegally selling things, right? It becomes, the enforcement side of this becomes massively, massively more difficult. And the fundamental reality, is that, yeah, maybe there's a small group of professionals out there, right, that are working white collar jobs and are, plugging away at the stock market and want to come home and smoke a little weed to be free Americans and relax at the end of the day. The vast majority of the folks that end up on these things are people that, are experiencing the real negative effects of marijuana, especially the marijuana that is around today, which are massive health and quite frankly, motivation killers. And that's where, again, that's where you get involved more and more into just a life that makes you more expensive for the government, more expensive to care for, more medical issues, all of these things. And this is the path that they're trying to take us down right now. Not because they're wanting to destroy America necessarily. I think the CCP would like that, but because they're trying to make as much money as possible on our backs.
That's absolutely right. And I think that, you think about the harms of this drug, they have magnified. So, and you rightly note that, there is that group of people that can use marijuana and they're not, maybe they don't have that many problems with it. And I think a lot of people would be shocked to know that basically for all drugs, the vast majority of people use any drug that's out there, heroin, fentanyl, marijuana, whatever it is, without a lot of problems. They use it once or twice. They use the drug maybe 10 times, don't get addicted. I think people think, heroin, that's a really bad drug. If I take it once, I'm going to be addicted to it. It doesn't work that way. It takes repeated use over a period of time. It also comes down to genetic factors. So what we're talking about with drugs and the harm that they cause is usually it is the minority of the people that use it. But let's just say you have 10 or 20% of people that use a drug like marijuana and have problems, or 10 or 20% of people that use a drug like fentanyl and have problems. Those harms are vastly magnified across our society. So that's why our predecessors in this country in the 70s passed the Controlled Substances Act to prohibit these substances, because they saw that drugs have a harm on the community that you can't control for. So it's not about individual rights. It's about the harm that these drugs have on everybody else. You can make a decision for yourself, but you're still going to get out and drive. You're still going to go to the factory and work. You're still going to be a parent. You're still going to have dependents. Your drug use is going to impact all of those things. And it's really interesting. There was a research study that just came out on medical marijuana patients nationwide. It's a giant research study that was just done, and it literally came out a few days ago. What they found was just about 30% of all the patients given medical marijuana, you can't get a prescription for it, but you get a recommendation for it. 30% of all the patients who were given medical marijuana developed an addiction to it. They had an addiction to marijuana. And that compares to the 7 to 13% of patients that were prescribed OxyContin during the opioid crisis. Only 7 to 13% of those patients had an addiction to OxyContin. So we're literally looking at medical marijuana has a higher addiction rate among patients it's given to than OxyContin did. And if you think I'm crazy, just Google this study. It's all over every major publication. Everyone's talking about it. And then look at the addiction rate for OxyContin. It's stunning. This is becoming a much more addictive substance now. And that's why with Schedule 3 says the drug has moderate to low potential for abuse. That is not marijuana. Marijuana now has a 30% addiction rate. It's higher than a lot of the drugs that are out there right now. It is becoming much more addictive because it is now commercial grade. It's made much more potent. And so that study I thought was quite striking, especially when you look at the comparison with the OxyContin prescriptions during the opioid crisis.
Absolutely. We really need to have you back to Ohio to talk about that when we do our briefing for the legislators. But you said something in passing right there. You said that medical marijuana cannot be prescribed by hospitals, right? Now we've moved beyond medical marijuana because you can't put the cat back in the bag. Now we're talking about adult use, recreational. But here we are with medical again, right? Because Trump is saying, hey, we might need to declassify it because of the medical uses of it. But talk to me. Why are hospitals, even in Ohio, right, after all these years of legalizing medical marijuana, if there is such a thing, right? Same dope dealers, same, dope stores, same money, resourcing and funding these places. But why is it that after all these years of medical marijuana, they still can't prescribe the medicine?
Great question. And it's really important for everybody to understand this. So marijuana as a whole plant is never going to be medicine. That's why rescheduling marijuana to Schedule 3, it makes no sense. But there are components of marijuana, and you mentioned this earlier, David, components of marijuana that have been approved. Marinol, which is pure THC, Epidiolex, which is pure CBD. There's research going on a lot of the different components of the marijuana plant. Those components were downscheduled. They're not Schedule 1. Those components have a medical use, so immediately they don't satisfy the criteria for Schedule 1. That makes total sense. That follows the science. That follows what we understand about medicine and drugs.
Medication.
It's what we do with everything.
Every drug has a basis in a plant in the first place.
Yes. But the FDA is never going to approve smoking raw marijuana as medicine. That will never, ever be medically approved as a medicine you can get a prescription for a wide array of reasons. It's very harmful to your health. There are much more effective ways to use medications. There are much more effective medications. So we're never going to be in a state where we have that. Right now, we're in a state where the government, the regulators are looking the other way. States call this medicine, but it is not medicine as we understand it, and it's not safe for patients. So moving marijuana to Schedule 3, whatever Trump's been told, it doesn't make it medicine any more than going to McDonald's makes you a cheeseburger, right? Like you can say it's Schedule 3, it is not medicine. It won't be approved that way. Or Taco Bell. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
But it marinates all day. Right. You eat it late at night, and it's just spectacular.
You've just gone side. You've lost me on this.
We are no longer in agreement, sir.
Luke, earlier this week, I did a kind of debate with Hugh Hewitt on this, and my whole point with him was the bottom line on this, that the only question every American needs to ask themselves with marijuana is our country better off with more people smoking marijuana? And I think the data is emphatically no. Right, like the cut. No matter the crisis we're dealing with, whether it's the cartels, whether it's education, whether it's safety on the roads, more people smoking weed is bad or taking gummies is bad for everybody. Can you unpack a little bit of what America already looks like with more people smoking marijuana today than ever before, and what we will look like if we just pour $2 billion into an industry that could care less about our children or about crime or about any of these things?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I like your framing of it, because we do need to think about policy as policy is a way that the government encourages behavior. So whether we like it or not, and there's a lot of people that I've talked to in the past that say, and I respect their opinion, they say, well, look, I don't like marijuana. I don't think anybody should smoke marijuana, but I think it's best if it's legal and regulated and all of those things. And I can, point to 1,000 reasons why they're wrong on that, but I respect that approach. However, you just can't have it that way. At the end of the day, you can't say something's legal and it's not promoted. It's not encouraged. Whether we like it or not, whether we'd like it to be different or not, our children grow up and they look at what's legal, and whatever is legal, they think is okay and even healthy, because the industry is not going to go out there and say, hey, here's the balance, these are the harms, these are the benefits. It's up to you to make your informed choice. No. The industry says, this is great. It's the best. We hear all the medical claims. It's not addictive. It's natural. It's organic, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So the industry has no incentive to tell you the harms. And so at the end of the day, when we make something legal, you're absolutely right, Aaron. It is promoted. It is encouraged. It's something that's normalized. And so what does society look like with rapidly rising levels of use of marijuana? Well, we're starting to see some of the early signs and indications of that. In Colorado, which is the state that I'm from, I live in DC now, but in Colorado, the average marijuana user uses every single day. More than 50% of all the users of marijuana in Colorado use marijuana every single day. That's more, by the way, than your average alcohol user. The typical alcohol user in Colorado, uses it every day. Like only about 30% of them use it every single day, which is also egregiously high. But we're talking very heavy use of marijuana, which is being encouraged by this industry. And now we're starting to see the links in the research with psychosis, with mental illness. We're seeing a lot of issues for young men. There's a lot of things we could talk about, but this is some new research that's come out. Among young men, there's declining rates of fertility, declining sperm counts. So this is something that I'm actually really concerned about, because that is a typical demographic that the industry is targeting, is the young men, 20s to 30s. That's the fastest rising demographic of people using marijuana at a heavy rate. And so if that's impacting young men's ability to, be fruitful and multiply, we shall say, that's something that is very concerning to me. That means the next generation is paying the price for that behavior. And again, that gets out of this individual rights framework, and we're thinking about the community impact and the downstream, down generation impact as well. Then we're seeing some research on autism as well that I'm really concerned about, where if you're a pregnant mother and you're using during pregnancy, there's an association now with autism in children that are coming out of the womb. And that's a very growing stage of research right now, but that's something we're keeping an eye on as well. So there are a lot of things we have to look at when we talk about legalizing a drug, and we want to think about all of those harms as they're magnified. I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that alcohol is the number one drug involved in arrests in this country. It's not heroin, it's not fentanyl, it's not marijuana. Alcohol is the number one drug involved in arrests in this country. So I just think, people need to take their minds out of, well, do I think one drug is worse than the other? And think instead about which drug is most normalized, which drug is most evenly spread across the country, because then you see the harms absolutely magnify exponentially.
Yeah. Luke, this is less of a question and more of a statement, but hearing you talk and unpack just reminds me of the tobacco industry playbook for decades of how they just sort of hand waved away the studies that were showing the harm of their product, and then they'd run these so-called independent studies that they were just funding to show that, oh no, this is actually a net positive, and then marketing to kids. And by the time that they finally had the reckoning in the late 80s and 90s about what their product actually was, the damage has been done. So I see or feel the sense of urgency, especially with President Trump set to make this decision that might reinforce the things that the marijuana industry is saying, or take some of that stigma away from marijuana in culture. So what is kind of the current sense of what he might do, or are there even some other provisions of this executive order that could have some additional ripple effects that we haven't talked about yet?
Great question. And definitely the big tobacco example is prescient. And this industry looks just like tobacco. Tobacco's invested, more than $10 billion in the marijuana industry. There's a lot of tobacco executives that are now in the marijuana industry. They're part and parcel the same thing at this point. And I'm very concerned because what President Trump is looking at doing would absolutely entrench this industry the way that tobacco is. And we're already seeing the dummy research like what we saw with tobacco, with marijuana. We're already seeing them trot out doctors for cannabis regulation. That's what one organization's called. A lot of different entities to front these medical claims, these bogus claims about it being harmless. So we are seeing this all over again.
We just went through this with transgender medicine, right? This was what WPATH did, and like they bring forth their experts, they create their own associations, and then
astroturfing is what it's called. Yeah, astroturfing. That's the name of the game in political advocacy right now. So very concerned about that. Yes, what we're hearing with Trump is unfortunately pretty concerning about what might be in this EO. Obviously, the Schedule 3 designation. Also hearing that he might be calling for safe banking, the Safe Banking Act to be passed. That's a rumor right now that we've seen reported in a few different places, that he might say the industry needs to get banked, which, Aaron, you rightly noted that being Schedule 3 does not get the industry into the banks, but the Safe Banking Act would get the industry into the banks. It would be financial legalization of marijuana. It would basically say, you guys can have bank accounts, you guys can take on investment. That would essentially be, it would be the best gift to the industry ever. It would allow them to proceed with no regulations nationwide, with no kinds of federal enforcement nationwide, but they would have the tax write-off, and they'd have access to the banks legally, which would just be crazy.
And don't, I got to say this especially, don't let your Republican elected officials off the hook on this. I've gotten into more arguments with Republican congressmen over this banking issue probably than anything else, because they'll try to say to me, oh, well, Aaron, I still oppose legalization. I still think marijuana is bad, but they just need to be able to have access to banking. And it's like, no, the reason we oppose legalization is we know it's bad for America if more people are smoking weed. And giving them access to banking is going to have more people smoking weed, right? You cannot look at the academic outcomes we have right now. Men working, Luke, I think this is one of the big things. We're talking about this at CCV so much right now. We have a crisis in America of men not entering the workforce. And more young men smoking weed is going to keep more young men out of the workforce, which is, again, when you're out of the workforce, you're way more likely to end up on Medicaid, way more likely to end up on SNAP, where like you become a taker, not a producer. And that is the net effect. And again, this is where the Democrats then come back around and say, hey, we got to spend more money on Medicaid. We got to spend more money on SNAP. Republicans and conservatives are fueling the problem when we grab onto this just stupid semi-libertarian mindset around drugs that just says, well, I don't want to tell somebody else what to do. Yeah, well, I don't want to tell somebody else what to do, except for when they're smoking weed and get behind the wheel of a car and running into me and my kids as we drive down the street. I mean, that's the fundamental reality of what we're talking about here. And President Trump and all of these people around him are missing the forest for the trees.
Totally agree. And I do want to add in just on the young men. Young men in this country, it's something that the policy around this is something I've paid a lot of attention to, and I share your concern about it because I look around me and I just look at, what are the incentives for young men right now? The incentives for young men are to be totally tuned out on their device, porn, gambling, weed. There's just video games, and I see a lot of my I'm still a young man. I think technically I have two girls, 9 and 4. I'm married, but I'm in my 30s. But I still consider myself I identify with the younger men's generation, and I see a lot of young men around me that they're going through it. And then I look at the ratios in colleges right now. Overwhelmingly female. Not a lot of young men are going to college right now. I mean, not a lot of these young men are getting jobs, as you mentioned. And there's a lot of different issues that play into that. And then what you find is a lot of broken homes where this is starting. And so young men are growing up. They're not having a strong father figure. They're not seeing the importance of that responsibility. Then that goes downstream. And this is something you guys are obviously working on. But these broken homes and kids and mothers being abandoned with babies, and they're having to make hard decisions when they're pregnant because the young man's not in the picture, right? So these are all things that I think are all tied together. And the drugs piece of this industry, and you just call it the addiction for profit industries that are out there, are there to take advantage. And their incentive alignment is to just sell more of their drugs and to peddle whatever claims that they have. And so for young developing brains out there, particularly young men we're talking about right now, they're growing up, their brains are still developing. They're facing a lot of different stressors. They're going for these, whether it's weed or anything else to satisfy to try to, calm the discomfort. They're not learning how to deal with that internally. They're not learning how to manage that. They're not learning, how to handle that through their faith in Christ, right? Through prayer and things of that nature. And that's, I think, what is leading us to a generation of men that needs desperately to be saved, that needs desperately to be protected and being given the ability to step forward as godly men, as leaders in their home, as leaders in their communities. We desperately need them to be a part of the picture. And you look at policies like marijuana, it's like this is just something else that's being added to the stack of problems and challenges. And if you think that taxpayer dollars are not going to have to be used to solve these problems, you can think again, because it is fully incorporated into our society. We have all these government programs that are impacted by it. There's no way to take the taxpayer out of this situation. So we have to think about those downstream costs. It can't just be something isolated.
And based on what you just said right there, that's what I've been fighting ever since we've been dealing with marijuana here at CCV, is that, listen, you don't want us to raise taxes, then we need these vice taxes, right? And so it's the red meat Republicans at the state house who are, pushing medical marijuana, and then they're pushing the recreational. Just to be flat out honest, that's where we are. And I'm also starting to hear right now is that we need this banking solution because we're losing. You don't want the cartels, Dave. So if we don't have the banking situation, then you're forcing illicit behavior out of the industry. And so if you're talking to me as an elected official here in the state of Ohio, who thinks I need this banking solution to stop the cartels, to increase the tax revenues, what would you say?
Well, I would say that is exactly what the cartels want to happen. They want you to give the access to the banks because that is exactly what's going to happen. Is the cartels will use these marijuana operators who are still federally illegal, and they will use them to get access to our banking system. And not only that, you will be giving them the opportunity to magnify the harms of what they do times a factor of 1,000 with no additional regulations, no accountability. Nobody's there to stop this industry. There's no enforcement against the ones who are the worst of the worst, because the feds are looking the other way right now. There's no enforcement. So you're going to give them all this access to all of this capital, all this investment. And then you're going to give the cartels access to do the laundering efforts that they can do. We had the Department of Justice. They issued a warning to the Senate when the Safe Banking Act was being looked at a few years ago in the Senate. They were thinking about taking it under consideration. Department of Justice put out a memo to all the senators and said, just so you know, if you pass this bill, it is rife with opportunity for money laundering problems, rife with opportunities for the cartels to get involved. They warned them. That was a big deal in stopping that bill from moving any further at that point, and it's been dead ever since. So I think that the cartel piece of it, nefarious activity piece of it, is something you can't avoid. I mean, and it's not, it really is about using common sense, I would say, because when you talk about allowing people to deal drugs in communities, I mean, you think that is an above board business? It is not an above board business. The people who are involved are not above board. Even at the biggest of those, publicly traded Canadian and U.S. marijuana companies, you would be stunned at the kinds of people that are running these companies. They're total crooks in every sense of the term. And these are not people you want to be given access.
Well, Luke, this has been a great conversation. I think it's really helpful for us to understand the landscape that we're dealing with here with Trump considering these executive orders. For our listeners who want to keep tabs on it, keep track of what you're doing, where can they find you? Where can they find Smart Approaches to Marijuana?
Yeah, find me on X at Luke Niforatos, and then also learnaboutsam.org is our website, learnaboutsam.org. We've got all the latest stuff there. We also have opportunities for you to write to the White House to tell them not to reschedule. We have a lot of other information. We have a whole page with all the resources on rescheduling so you can understand. We took some time to talk about it today. I know it's a little in-depth. We have everything you need on that website page at learnaboutsam.org to learn about rescheduling and what that means. And we'll be working with states regardless, whether Trump does it, whether he doesn't do it. There's going to be a lot of work to do. It's absolutely astonishing the level of support we're seeing from across the country. Unfortunately, I think sometimes, the kettle needs to boil for people to know it's time to act. But now that Trump's saying, we're strongly looking at this and it feels imminent, people who are allies, who we didn't even know were allies, big, medium, and all the way down to the grassroots, big shots down to little shots, everybody's reaching out and wanting to help. So now's the time to get involved, regardless of what happens.
Well, and especially as we're coming up to year end, I do want to say there is a ton of money in fighting for legalization of marijuana. There is no money in fighting against it. So I'm always amazed at the quality of research and work that Smart Approaches on Marijuana puts out. And again, it cuts across the aisle. So even as you're thinking about where you support at year end, I think Smart Approaches is a phenomenal organization to support, and one of those that has a ripple effect across the country, because there's nobody that is as good on this issue as they are, and we're just grateful for you guys.
Appreciate that. And thank you all for lending your voice to it. It's been an important thing, and we are grateful to have really strong partners in this fight, like the three of you gentlemen. So thank you for the great work you're doing.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.